Right, I've got the absolutely fantastic Mr. Ninder Johal with us. I'm going to let Ninder introduce himself, and I want to start the podcast episode going by asking him where did all the entrepreneurship start for himself. So, Ninder, I'll ask you to introduce yourself and then carry into that question.
Adam, thank you very much for the intro. So I was born in Birmingham, working class background. So I wasn't surrounded by entrepreneurs. I didn't know anybody in business. So working class background. Um, Usual, went to local school, went to university. And why did I go to do accountancy and finance? And this is going to make you smile, Adam. I always thought as a young kid that anybody in a suit must be clever. So that was it. So you'd influence in your childhood and come from a working class background. I'm not used to seeing suits. When I see somebody in a suit, I think clever person. So my career path was pretty rudimentary. It was either going to be accountancy or law or something that wore a suit. I know it sounds silly, but so I went to do accountancy and finance and thought that was going to be my vocation in life. So I graduated in, I think, end of June. July, August, about 18 interviews with various accountancy practices who all shared one thing: they didn't want me. So 18 interviews I flunked. So that took me into September. So graduated, 18 interviews, I flunked for whatever reason. So I thought, well, I better do something here. So then somebody had whispered to me something called an MBA, a Master's in Business Administration. I sort of had a bit of a vague. There was no internet at the time. I just remember doing some research, grabbed the nearest copy of the Yellow Pages. Don't know if you remember the Yellow Pages.
Yeah.
Looked for a university that I could get to by bus. Aston University was close. So did the course, and actually what happened was, from a bean counter, so somebody wanted to be a bean counter, suddenly I was exposed to the world of sales and marketing through the MBA, because I majored in marketing. So sometimes what you study can change you. And suddenly I saw more than a functional role. I saw a much more expansive role. Suddenly I was introduced to business. I was introduced to marketing. And so anyway, I managed to secure a post in consultancy. So and one of the roles just before that, I joined a company called GEC in Liverpool. Very funny people, Liverpoolians, very funny people. And one of the jobs I was given, and this is where you learn. So they said, look, they were manufacturing what we call fuses. You know, little fuses.
Yeah.
The big fuses that you put in big buildings. They said your job is to go and sell them. And I tell you, you learn a lot when you have to suddenly sell, because you've not been trained. No one's taught you how to sell. So it's a bit on the hoof. I did okay. I remember one incident. Somebody didn't want me to come knocking on the door, because when I knocked on the door opened and 3 Alsatians pounced. And oh yes, and I broke my own personal 100-meter record without a shadow of a doubt. So
I'd certainly do
that
it.
was So that was my first understanding of sales, which was quite interesting. And when you're exposed to sales at a young age, it hardens you in the sense that, you know, you can take whatever comes after that, because you're faced by rejection. People reject you. No. But at a young age, I think you can take it. I think you can take it at a young age because you've got no baggage. And then my next role then took me to consultancy. And what that meant was I was flying around the company. About 3 of us, we were, I suppose, hatchet men. And that's where the finance came in. So typically you'd go into a business unit, you'd open their books, you'd see where the cash is hemorrhaging, and you'd try and correct it, whether it means removing layers of management, reconfiguring the shop floor, process engineering it, making sure the flow is better, the productivity is better. But before we did all that, we used to do 2 things. Before we went into reception, we'd walk into the car park.
Yeah.
And you'd walk into the car park and you'd look at the cars. And so if a business is hemorrhaging cash, but they got the top of the state-of-the-art cars, that's telling you something. The other thing we used to look for in the car park was reserved parking. And if the reserved parking was for particular people, and in those reserved parking were the top of the range cars, that told you a lot about ego, it told you a lot about spend, and it told you a lot about the culture in the place. So before you even look at the books, although we've looked at the books slightly before because we know they're hemorrhaging cash, you've already got an idea. And as you walk through in reception, you sit down, you look around, and what's on the wall, the state of the carpet, how the receptionist speaks to you, adds more. And then, of course, it's your first point of call. Who comes to greet you and take you upstairs?
Yeah.
And if it's following what we've seen outside, it'll be a secretary or somebody else. So that I start to understand culture and leadership style, and anyway,
absolutely.
so the first thing we used to do, Adam, to get the books right. So how could we get rid of non-performing people and bring cash flow outflow down? We would replace the BMW 5 Series with Sierras. And Sierras. And
oh, the old classic.
you remember the Sierra? And that would lead to two things. Those who genuinely wanted to make an interest in sales would be motivated to do it. But those who were looking for flash car, they were out.
Yeah.
And they were all gone within a week because they said, we're not driving these things around. So that just gives you an idea that. So whilst I was doing that, I was playing and managing a band called Achonic. It's a Bhangra band. So in the evenings, I'd be touring the country playing with this band, and then coming back in the morning, 5, 6 o'clock, or whatever it is, and then going to work.
So were you playing in the band and managing the band as well?
And managing the band, and playing and being part of this team that's going around the country.
Yeah.
So I was enjoying the band for one particular reason, because I was managing the band. I didn't realize this, but I'd taken on a leadership role.
Yeah.
You don't realize that. You just do. So I started to learn about teamwork. I started to learn about knitting the creative components together so that the team performs better, whilst at the same time allowing those creative elements to flourish. Then there's the admin side of it, which was to make sure that everybody got to rehearsals, got to the gigs on time, got their equipment on stage, played, pack up, go. They were all 17, 18-year-olds. Managing people of that age, I was only in my early 20s. That was quite a task. Understanding how to get the best out of a bass player and a drummer and a keyboard player. Now, I wasn't the best musician in the band, but I understood leadership and marketing.
Yeah.
So my job was probably just to keep the unit tact and let them all flourish whilst not getting away with what they wanted to do. So I didn't realize, but I was learning leadership, and I was learning, understanding creativity. And of course, I was then in charge of promoting the band and marketing. Remember my MBA I majored in? And as I was doing this, I suddenly realized that actually I was enjoying being an entrepreneur. Okay. And I didn't know that's what I was doing. Remember, I was in paid employment.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that's what I was doing, but I was enjoying it. So I did the unthinkable, invested all my time in doing 2 degrees, a master's, and I resigned.
Okay.
And I said, well, I'm going to set up a record company, and that's my first act. I'm going to sign other acts up. And then off I went, and I started selling records to largely Asian markets. But I did have a dream, though, Adam, behind this, that one day the music that I was involved in, which was largely Asian, so Asian vocals, Asian melody, but dance music, and Asian instrumentation, that one day we'd cross into the charts. That was my dream.
Yeah.
That was the dream. So I quit my job, took some acts on, then toured the world with not only my band, but other acts. So with my band, we played with Tom Jones. Brilliant. He is, by the way, brilliant.
Fantastic.
I'm telling you, he is brilliant. Probably the most violent band we've ever played with is Prodigy.
Oh, yeah. I've seen Prodigy.
Listen, it's an incredibly violent set. Huge set. Fatboy Slim.
Oh, yeah.
So we played with Fatboy Slim. So we did some major concerts around the world. And only a couple of years ago, we played at one of the biggest music festivals in Malaysia. And they called it Bhangra in the Jungle. And it was in the jungle. And what was interesting about that, in today's world, you couldn't get internet, you couldn't get Facebook, you couldn't get anything. And we were actually in the jungle. Great gig. A lot of people, 40, 50,000. But we were cut off from the world. And that was quite surreal, actually. That was quite surreal. And we learned what it was like to be in a non-internet world, Internet of Things. So fast forward, so we started selling records largely to Asian people. Most people were rejecting me when I would go to them and say, come and listen to this music. But I was a hardened, I wouldn't say criminal, but I was a hardened salesman, because I know what it was like when people set loose dogs on me trying to sell things.
Yeah.
No, so I was okay. I was okay when people kept rejecting me. Kept going. And then eventually in 2003, 2002, I met an Italian company. So I went abroad and I was spending a lot of money attending exhibitions. Nobody else was doing it. Meeting other record companies. And I said, would you like to listen to this music? They said, oh, no, this is rubbish. Don't understand it. The vocals are strange. The instrumentation is strange. Yeah, we understand your accent. You're from England. But barring that, the rest of it's just, it's hard. It was hard because I was trying to sell something quite impossible. But I kept at it. And then I remember I went to my 10th year. I'd always land at the airport. I'd ring my wife to say I've just landed in Cannes, nice part of the world, admittedly. And I'm just about to settle into the hotel. And she said, I remember the words, do you think the dream's a bit too much? Do you think you ought to really maybe knock it on the head and do something else? But that year I met a little Italian company who said, yeah, actually, this is something quite quirky. Sounds quite good. We'll take it. We're not going to give you anything. We'll give you royalties. I said, I'm happy with that. 3 months later, I went to Germany. So that was in France. I went to Germany, met another label who said, heard something on the Italian label. We'll take you. We're not going to give you money. We'll give you royalties. I said, that's fine. So still a hard struggle, 10 years at it, dream, crossover. And then what I didn't know was that the record started to smash the clubs in Istanbul. What I didn't know, a lot of the Turks traveled to Germany a lot. So they started playing it in Germany. And then out the blue in the summer, I was walking on, the phone rang, and Universal from Germany said, we want the record. I said, no. They said, we want it for the world. And I was a bit cocky. I said, no, you can't have it for the world. We'll give it to you for bits of Europe. Then we started to get traction. Then I got a call from Sony from the UK, said, we'd like it for the UK. I was in Oxford Circus one balmy summer evening, and I heard the track. I turned around. It was a Beatle, but the people dancing were white people. I knew then we were onto something. And then we started to get Radio 1 play. I went back to meet them, 11th year now. And as I got there, we landed on a Saturday. Sunday, the Top of the Pops used to do their charts.
Yeah.
When I left the country, I was told by my distributors we could be in for top 10. And they announced the charts on that Sunday, and they said straight at number 5, Monday at the Prodigy, but Punjabi MC, we charted at number 5.
Fantastic.
And then Jay-Z got on board, and we charted in America at number 7. Then we had 9 number 1s throughout Europe. We were the biggest selling ringtone in Japan. We featured on the MTV Awards. We were licensing the music to loads of EastEnders, Orange Phone adverts, Bollywood movies. I'd achieved the dream. I'd done the impossible, which was sell music that nobody could understand, and we got it to chart.
Sell something you actually thought was going to, as you said, was impossible to sell. Stepping back with your wife saying that to you, how did you react to that?
Right. So I made a fatal flaw, and I would say this to anybody who's an entrepreneur, is you're going to be in dark places. You're going to be in places where it's going to be very uncomfortable. And at that point, you need a support structure around you. And, when everything falls around you, your wife and your kids will still be there. They're the only ones who will probably stand right up next to you. You should make sure they understand what's going on from day one. because the bank manager's not going to understand you. They're just going to bounce your checks. The people you owe money to, they'll be lining up outside court, chasing you. Nobody's your friend. Everybody's your friend when you're doing well, but when you're in a dark place, nobody's your friend. I realized that. So the mistake I made was in those very difficult 10 years, I didn't really tell my wife much about what was going on. And I think that was a mistake. And I think that was a mistake. And now she's heavily involved in what we do now. And second, so two things. One, she's heavily involved. She'll see things I don't see.
Yep.
Secondly, she's got my back because it's something she's part of. Thirdly, it's a great environment for my kids to understand how business ticks because they see it. And fourthly, it's good for my mental well-being that if I see a problem, I can share it with someone who has the same goals as you. So that was the mistake I made, which I never made it after that. And that one dark place, I tell you, that one dark place, 3 distributors of mine, so we're going back mid-90s, went bust. One was in Singapore, one was in America, one was in Brick Lane. Meant I'd breached my covenants, my overdraft had gone.
Yeah, okay.
Bank manager rang me in the morning and said, Mr. Johal, every check you write, we will now bounce. You have a problem, resolve it. Don't care. That was my sort of branch manager. And so instead of telling the wife, I was still mulling over it. My wife said to me that evening, about 9 o'clock, my son was about 2. Do you remember Blockbusters? You heard of Blockbusters?
Yeah.
Yeah, he said, go and get him a DVD. I said, no problem. So I went to a local ATM machine, put my debit card in to pull out, I think it was about £2.05 or something, because the Blockbusters were £1 each. And the cards were on my machine. So the bank manager seriously did what he said he was going to do. So I didn't have £1 to my name to go and get a DVD from Blockbusters. And it is my fault because if I told my wife what was going on, then... So now I'm thinking, what the hell do I do here? So I roll up to Blockbusters and can you believe my luck? They decided to shut early.
Oh, God.
I was able to go home and say, you won't believe it, but it was shut. Oh, okay. So the following morning, very, very quickly, to cut the long story short, mobile phone was disconnected. Was on my knees, got to a phone box. They did exist. Got to a phone box, made a call, got hold of 3 layers up, regional director at the bank and said, look, I'm in trouble. He said, I know, I can see your name here. Can I come and see you? He said, when? He said, next week. I said, no, I got a problem today. Can I see you this afternoon? He said, I'll see you in 3 hours. I ran home, got a piece of paper, because I wasn't going to go in with a problem. I had to go in with a solution.
Solution, yeah.
You've got to go in with a solution. And anybody who thinks like that, so if something goes wrong, think about solutions. Don't now think about why am I in this problem, because it'll eat you up. It'll eat you up. Focus on solution. Focus on going forward. What's happened now has happened.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so just focus on the forward. So that's where the MBA came in and the finance degree. I was able to articulate very quickly solutions. So when I walked in, I remember he said, what do you need? I said, you got 2 options, Mr. Bank Manager. You can either now say to me, it's game over. And at least I can be upfront with my creditors and say, look, it's game over. Or you can support me. And by the way, here's my solution. And I said, by the way, I don't know what your problem is. You've got my house anyway. They said, we don't want your house. We don't want your house because if we have your house, we're going to have to sell it at a distressed value. So we'll get very little back for it. Secondly, you're on the road. And thirdly, the PR won't be very good for us either.
Yeah.
So you know, you may have given the house, but really you need to find another way around. Looked at the solutions. He said, what do you want? I said, I want to double my overdraft. He said, what, 100 grand? I said, yes. I said, I could trade my way out. And I said, the fallback plan, Mr. Bank Manager, is if everything still goes wrong, I can go and get myself a highly paid job and pay you over 10 years. Job done. I came out of it. But a lot of lessons learned. And the lessons were stress test. Always make sure every week you look at the worst case scenario. Do you have the reserves? Do you have the finance in place? Worst case scenario. And if you hit worst case scenario, do you have plans ready to activate?
Yeah.
Numbers matter all the time. Get your numbers right. Secondly, make sure those around you are aware of your numbers. so they can spot the same as you. Thirdly, entrepreneurship has a lot of highs, it has a lot of lows. Be ready for the lows. Be ready for the lows. But if you've planned and you've stress tested and you've gone through those, that would be easier to do. Fourth bit of a piece of advice: when you're in a crisis, your brain doesn't think rationally. You are more likely to make wrong mistakes in a crisis. If you're thinking beforehand with scenarios and plans, you can go to them, dig them out, and you've gone to the solutions. You'll be a lot more rational.
Yeah.
Crisis management is a horrible place to be in.
Yeah.
Because you're clouded by the wrong stuff, and probably you'll make the wrong decision. How did my wife react? She was patient. She discovered afterwards the trouble I was in, but I'd got myself a solution. And then as we diversified into event production, into publishing, I made sure she came along the journey. She's got a couple of degrees herself. She's got a first class in business and a marketing degree. So it made sense to get those skill sets.
Yeah.
And we've flourished ever since. But you learn a lot of lessons en route, and that's just some of them I learned.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, do you think, going right back to the beginning, where with the management and the record side, because this is a national record, national records. I'll come back to that as well in a minute. Do you think, and it's probably a hard question to answer, do you think if you hadn't have had that toughened, hardened skin through the sales side, that you'd have done things differently or even carried on with the rejection if you hadn't had that sales side from the records?
I think one of the things I would say to people who go into entrepreneurship is the hardest bit is the sales. So, you can hire, with all due respect, you can hire the best qualified accountant, but there's no money coming in. There's nothing for them to do. Nothing for them to do. So whilst I've reiterated and emphasized the need for numbers, I have emphasized that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you've got to keep an eye on the numbers. But there's no revenue coming in, the numbers will tell you anyway.
Yeah, because I say on the manufacturing side, you can have the most lean, most efficient factory going, but if you haven't got sales, you're dead. Simple as that. You're dead. You're dead. So you just
and amazingly, when we're all at school, so just think about this, Adam. We're never taught finance at school. Yeah, we're never taught what a credit card is, wallet. We're never taught that. We're never taught sales. We're never taught soft skills, how to talk to people, how to negotiate with people. All the soft skills, all the skills we need to succeed in life, we don't get taught.
No, we don't. Yeah.
The school system, my impression, the education system is flawed.
Yeah, I agree.
Completely flawed.
Totally agree.
They are the curriculum is designed to produce robots who think in black and white. We're not trained, we're not educated to think creatively or to think about life skills that will then determine. So my son graduated in economics and business, and I said to him, your tough journey starts now. That was the easy bit.
Yeah. But
actually is what can you make now going forward? And my daughter who's just starting her A-levels, I've got her listening to podcasts and business podcasts to get her to read the press. And I said, you need to know what's going on around the world. It's okay about printers making all kinds of noises. I don't know why. I'm trying to see if I can pull the plug, but I think it's gone quiet. I think it's gone quiet. But I think the system is flawed. And did I learn from my early days? Probably. A lot of businesses go bust because they're overconfident with the sales.
Yeah.
They can't cope with the rejection when it happens. They haven't got the support structure around them. And they do things they're probably not qualified to do. So I was talking to one of my brilliant startup winners. And he said, I started day one. He said, he was an engineer. He said, I'd never sold in my life. And I knew I had to sell. Something like noise is just doing my head in. disconnected
Pull the
it.
plug.
And and he said, so I suddenly realised I had to do the sales. I said, well, why is that? He said, there's no one else in the room to delegate it to. So he had to do it.
Yeah.
But unfortunately at school, we're not taught. And we're not taught at school to be resilient and how to face those dark corners. So I personally think the education system hasn't changed in 300 years. I think it's flawed. And I think we could all be better entrepreneurs, be better people, be better contributors to our society, to be more politer to people, to treat people with integrity, if we were all taught those personal skills at school.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. It's just, we tend to, and I think this is where some of the big businesses play out as well. And as the businesses grow, is that the entrepreneur, the creative side, because they are very, very close, the creatives and the entrepreneurs side. And as the business grows, we build the systems and we want this stability in there. So we bring in the conservative side of,
That's right.
of recruitment.
That's right.
And the entrepreneur is wheeled out. And the entrepreneur is the one that drives the innovation, and drives the next stages. And then the businesses, ultimately become stagnated. And I think we do suffer with that. We do suffer with that very much.
Well, I think a couple of things happen there, Adam. So when we're kids, we don't understand risk. That makes sense. We try anything.
Yeah.
We try anything and everything. As little kids, you'll do things you think, oh, God, I can't believe, and our parents tell us off. But as we grow older, we become more risk averse.
Yeah.
And we try less stuff because, again, the school hasn't taught us that creative thinking, risk assessment. Then what happens as the business grows, your investors demand more governance. And more governance means you have to bring in more structures. More structures mean the decision-making gets slower.
Yeah.
And as you employ employees, they perhaps don't have the same passion as you do. And in fact, because they're employees, they don't want to take risks because their job's at risk. That makes sense. So the whole cog starts to slow down.
Yeah.
So the challenge of an entrepreneur is to keep that creative and that entrepreneurial DNA within their business. And one way of doing it, and a lot of people do it, is once it gets to a large size, they split it up. So the component becomes smaller and smaller. They still stay energetic. But of course, the problem then you lose the benefit of the economies of scale. But listen, that's another place.
I was going to ask you, where did the name for the record label come from?
Yeah, well, so we were in the studio, and I still remember we were penning the first track down. We finished the track, and the track finishes with the word called Nachala, Nachala, Nachala. Nachala means to dance. So N-A-C-H in Punjabi is dance. Right. So if someone says, let's have a nach, they're saying, let's have a dance. And the engineer at the time was a non-Asian guy. And just as we finished it, he said, oh, so our vocalist said, Nachala, Nachala, Nachala. And he said, oh, that sounds a bit like naturally, 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 natural. I thought, you know something? That's a brilliant name. So natural is where it came. So the first four letters are dance. So it's a spin on words, natural.
Fantastic. I did wonder as I was reading through it. I've always wondered because we've been connected for a little while.
Yeah.
So National Records still going, and that side.
Yeah. I mean, look. What happened there? It was quite easy. Well, firstly, I'd achieved my dream. Yeah. I'd got to 5, and I was not likely to hit top 5 again like that. So I was conscious that was something that was quite good. Enjoyable, did it. What do I do next? I had a skill set that was pretty transferable. I understood lighting, I understood sound, I understood video production, I understood entertainment. So I then set up an event production company.
Yeah.
Saying to corporates, I'll come and do your event production for you. Realized we were quite good at it. Somebody said, you should run your own events. It's not a bad idea. So I took my transferable skills around branding and marketing other artists. Yeah. So instead of now branding other artists, I started to create our own brands. And these were brands that we would own, because unlike an artist, you see, you can spend 5 years drawing their brand, but when their contract's finished, that brand walks out the door. The brands walked out the door. And so we thought, well, okay, maybe this is one way of keeping our own brand. So that's where the natural events kicked off. We then set up another brand called Signature Awards, and that's doing well. And then, of course, as the events, because of the pandemic, we then came up with other channels of promotion, and we'll talk about them. So that's where the word nudge came from.
Okay. So going into the national awards and that side, so how did all this sort of like kick off and come about for you?
Okay, so
you spoke about the branding and keeping it and doing something and moving on to the next thing, this entrepreneur.
Yeah, so this is going to sound so strange, Adam. So we had on our hands one of the biggest global music tracks of all time. The earlier part of the journey, I'd spent selling Asian dance music to Asian people, really. Yeah. So my distributors were Asians. The end consumer was Asian. And obviously, in the last year of my musical journey, we'd broken. But up till that point, the only time, Adam, this is going to make you smile, and I'm going to be politically correct here, the only time I met a white man was either the tax man or the VAT man, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? So, and then, of course, we blew up around the world, and then I sort of met people, licensees all around the world. And so when I came back to do the event side, I suddenly realized, Adam, that I didn't know that many people outside the entertainment industry. So somebody said to me, you need to network. And that was something I hadn't come across. And networking, so I adopted networking, then realized that if I was going to get into, and here I'm going to be politically correct, but if I was going to get into event production, I'd have to meet more white people. And I thought, well, where am I going to meet white people? And somebody mentioned the Chamber of Commerce. I ended up at the Chamber of Commerce. I did a reasonably good job of connecting. I became its president. So I became the president of the Black Country Chamber of Commerce. And what was brilliant about the Chamber was, one, they were fantastic people. But secondly, I met a lot of businesses and realized actually sometimes in life, it'd be quite good if we could acknowledge and appreciate the role of business. And that's where the awards bit came in. But I also realized that if I could put an event where we celebrate businesses, but we put an event together where people are then able to connect with each other, so celebration, connection. But the third element I thought that was quite important was one of learning. So I wanted to bring a learning aspect to the event. And we normally did that in a couple of ways. One was we're trying to bring a really key, influential keynote speaker, so that people would then learn off their journey and potentially learn off other people in the room. So those are the three ingredients. And the fourth thing what I wanted to do was I wanted to bring people from all different communities. Because what I found was if I went to an event, it was either all white people or an event where they were all on Asian people. We didn't really have that cross-fertilization. And business is, for everybody, it's the same.
Yeah.
The same. We all have the same challenges around tax and VAT and paying rates and buying and selling. And so those were sort of my remit. And really, I suppose the underlying word was to create and enhance wealth creation with entrepreneurs in mind. And that's what we set out to do. And thankfully, they've grown over the years into quite considerable events.
Yeah, because you've got that wealth creation in your. I haven't got your link, your tag, your title, haven't you, on the thing. Going back, you're saying this the white and Asian, and they're coming together. How long do you think it took to actually?
Quite a while. Okay, so here we go.
Migrate in.
Yeah. So event year one was 95% Asian, 5% non-Asian. And by the time we did our last set of events, I'd say it's 60-40. And our winners come from Chinese backgrounds, Afro-Caribbean backgrounds, Asian backgrounds, all kinds of different backgrounds. There was an Iraqi who won, I think a Persian. We've had keynote speakers like Piers Linney, Dragon's Den.
Yeah.
We've had a lady called Kavita Oberoi. She's on the Apprentice. So she's on one of those sort of judging panel. So we've had people from all types of different backgrounds speaking and attending, because business is for everyone. We're in a global marketplace. And of course, the other thing is, Adam, you tend to learn from people that are different to you.
Yeah.
Because there's no chance of a group think then, because, you know, you absorb things that they think differently, makes you think differently. Whatever you say to them, they take on board and they impart it to somebody else. And without wealth creation, Adam, you have no sustainable community.
No,
without wealth creation, you have no employment. Without wealth creation, you have no sense of self-esteem. Without wealth creation, you have no taxes to pay for all the services we enjoy. Without wealth creation, our kids can't go to school. No. Without wealth creation, when you have had a heart attack, there's no NHS. Without wealth creation, we don't have a sustainable and a growing economy, notwithstanding what's going on now, the 5th largest economy in the world. That is all based on the endeavors of entrepreneurs and SMEs.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, totally. Because that is the one thing for me is I have it in my LinkedIn profile, is the success of our businesses is that it means our social communities and are successful and strive and grow and everything. As you're saying, that's that wealth creation, and that's what we want. Definitely want. And that was the one of the things that I've spoke about it before is, from this COVID situation, one of the things that really was a positive from my side is I've got neighbours. It was the first time I've been here for 11 years, and the first time I've got to know them, being socially distanced, but coming out clapping for the NHS, this and the other. Got to know them. Then there was little VE day parties and things like that. And that's something we can't afford to lose moving forward. We need to keep that community side, because it did bring people together, I think, personally.
And before I forget something, Adam, that looks like a bass guitar behind you. Is that right?
No, that one is actually a thrash metal job. That one is. Yeah. No, you can just say it. No, yeah, it's God, that's got about 5 pickups on it. That is.
Okay, nice.
Yeah,
nice.
All right.
Nice.
But yeah, no. It's yeah, no, definitely that wealth creation is a definite must. And I know you're a big networker, because I know from that side of drawing and bringing people in. So the Natural Awards, that started off Black Countryside, did it? And then and now it's spread. So, because I know, yeah. Or is it the Signatures Awards as a spread, or both?
Yeah, both really. So we started in Wolverhampton first, then we moved into Birmingham ICC, then we moved into Leicester, and then we moved into London. We've just had to, the London would have been another week, I think, another couple of weeks. So we've just had to cancel that. And then we've got plans to go to New Delhi, and then potentially plans to go to Africa as well. And we've had inquiries from them. We've had inquiries from Pakistan as well. So the brand will be exploring those territories. And why are we exploring those territories? Well, business is universal. Yeah. And despite the sort of the nationalistic sort of paths all the individual nations have taken, I still think globalization is there. I think post-COVID, and particularly post-Brexit, I think we need to reach out to other markets, and that's the role behind taking the awards overseas. They'll be sort of combined with a trade mission so that people can create trade as well. But the underlying remit is wealth creation. And if we can help UK PLC trade better, grow better, have greater prosperity, more sustainable communities, then we'll have played our part.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, okay, the awards, Signature and the National, you've covered that and where that's going. What about where it all started from, the National Records and that side? Where's that going? Where's that moving forward? Is it something that you're going to move forward? Is it something that, or is it that changed for you now?
So the records was, sorry, I sort of stopped halfway. So I'd achieved the dream, but the record company was still going. And then, of course, this thing came along, the mobile phone. Yeah. And the whole business model changed overnight. Suddenly, digital was the way forward. And what I mean by that was we were suddenly, all these CDs we had in the warehouse, suddenly we start to ask, what are they doing? We had people in the units with pickups going around picking up all the stock, sending it out to overseas territories. Suddenly, we didn't need that skill set because actually now you sell records by pressing a button.
Yeah.
And we didn't need the office, the big warehouse space. We didn't need the people shifting stock around. Actually, what we now needed was people with digital skills and marketing skills in the digital area. The problem behind it that the model changed because the return on investment changed, because now suddenly people were downloading for 79p as opposed to buying albums. And by this stage, I'd already moved over into event production anyway. So what we do now is, so I suppose you can call it, I wouldn't call it a pension, but we've built up an asset base with loads of content, and that content continues to be sold digitally, and that content continues to be used for what we call synchronization with films and things. So that still ticks nicely in the background.
Nice passive income that ticks along. And
yeah. And what was interesting, there was an uplift during COVID because people were nostalgic and went back into that asset base to listen to some of the old tracks. We did very well on CD sales, believe it or not. So that bit ticked nicely. And then, of course, over the time, I always say to everybody, always diversify your income because you don't know what's going to hit you. So I built up a small little property portfolio. And I've always been investing in the markets. So again, so, at different asset classes with different income streams at different parts. And it meant that when the events took a hit, because of that wide portfolio, it didn't bring, does that make sense? It didn't bring me down.
Absolutely. It was my mentor has been saying to me, you've got to have different income streams to be able to turn them on and off and passive and all manner of stuff to survive, because the COVID has happened, as we all know, and that's made a lot of us rethink. But it's not going to be this one and only time. It is going to happen again. It's going to come again. So you've got to be able to set up for it and be able to get through it.
Last night we were on a seminar with one of our sponsors, Investec Wealth and Investment, and I remember saying to a couple of entrepreneurs a couple of years ago, I said, look, I think you're doing well, but I think you now need to start putting some of the money aside into these vehicles. And I remember one entrepreneur said to me, no. He said, if I put, £1,000 into my business, I'll get a 16% return. But if I put it over there, I'll only get 5 or 6. That's fine, provided your business can keep giving you 16%. And what we do know, because of COVID, some brilliant, viable businesses are gone. But had those entrepreneurs done what I was suggesting, then even if their brilliant, viable business goes down, they've been thinking like that. And I think now some of them are starting to think, this could happen. Your best laid plans.
It goes back to what you were saying earlier. You've got to have that plan A, B, C, D, and E, and F, and the risk mitigation and that side of it.
And the stress management, the stress testing of it. You've got to be stress testing all the time.
Business continuity and the hand of God comes into it in certain cases.
Absolutely.
So I know you've now come on, because this is I've seen a post on LinkedIn, was it, with this business influencer? And I think it was a magazine you're doing. So is this something that you're now going into now?
It is.
So how did this come about then?
Okay, so do you remember I said earlier on that it's always good to brainstorm in the good times about what potential opportunities you should visit in the future. So both Ninder and I, every month, we sit down, scrap a piece of paper, and we say, right, if everything was brilliant today and we had unlimited resource, unlimited manpower, unlimited financial, what would we like to do? And we always write down a list of things, and we dismiss them. Maybe the time's not right. Maybe the return on investment's not good at the time. So we write all these things down. And one of the things we always wanted to do was, we think, to build an ecosystem, and a magazine would be a good idea. But we parked it and said, probably we'll do it in 2022. That's when we'll do it. but we'd already had the idea and just parked it. There's a number of other ideas
Yeah.
which we'll visit when the time is right. So they've been there parked. So when the crisis hit, remember back to, you tend to think, we just went back to our notes, pulled the notes out and said, right, let's look at all those ideas that we dismissed for whatever reason. Can we do any of them now? And the magazine popped up.
Okay.
So all we did then was take that, modify it slightly. We didn't have a name, but Ninder came up with the name Business Influence. And of course, one of the reasons we ask our people, why do 600 people come to our events, premium member events? And we were told by so many people, it's the people in the room. You have influencers in the room that we want to talk to. So the title became quite easy. What it also meant, so there's a lot of logic to it. So the logic was it would build that ecosystem. Secondly, while the events are in abeyance, remember the property side is still going, the business side is still going, all the other stuff is still going. But the events was obviously decimated. What it meant was that it would give us a reason to stay relevant in that space, because then we can talk about the magazine. It would also allow all those partners that we've worked in the past and are going to work in the future a channel for their branding to continue, and for us to tell the world we're still working with these partners. Thirdly, remember back to learning. If we could fill the magazine full of bits that when somebody's read it and thinks, I've learned something here, we're disseminating information, the very same thing from our events. Fourthly, we know there's a segment of the population who can't come out on a Friday night, a segment of the population who actually hate black tie events, a segment of the population are too far away from one of the cities, and these four segments, still want to engage with the brand. They now have an opportunity to reach our audience through the magazine without having to come to the event. Fifthly, those who sit in one of the other four or have not been converted might read this and say, do you know something? I think we will buy some tickets for the event.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that fits in. And then the other idea we've got lined up once this comes out next week is we're going to do a bit like you. We're going to do a podcast.
Yep.
So it means, and then that'll be on YouTube as well. So it means, sense-wise, if you like reading about business, you can read about it. If you prefer to read about business digitally, you can go to the website. If you prefer to listen about business, you can listen to the podcast. If you prefer to watch about business, you can go to YouTube. And if you like to meet people, just come to the event.
It covers all the bases. It just
covers all the human sensories.
Yeah.
And of course, human senses. And because we've been doing it now for 4 or 5 years, we have built up an audience. So we do have channels now. And it means for those who are partnered with us now, suddenly they can exploit their brand through all those channels. And of course, with digital, you don't have a geography problem. Again, somebody from India probably is too much of a trip to come to see us, but now can connect with us through YouTube, through podcast, through digital, through reading with our brand.
Yeah, absolutely. So is this the first edition? You've just shown it up there.
Yeah,
is that the first
yeah.
And are you doing this quarterly, monthly, or is it?
No. I think the plan is probably every 2 months. But I think if we get traction, we've got enough content to be honest to go on a monthly basis.
Okay.
But so the hard copy, the physical will probably be every 2 months, but digitally we'll be updating daily on the website with digital. So there'll be an app so you can download it, and so we'll be hopefully filling what the global markets are doing in the morning, what the global markets are doing in the evening, what breaking news has happened during the day. And then when the next edition comes, you can read the whole edition as well. And you can go back and archive, read previous editions. So the kind of stuff we've covered in this one, we've looked at global issues like the automotive industry. So David Bailey, who's a university, is a real expert on this. He gives us an idea on how automotive is going to cope. We spoke to Fiona Allen, who runs the Hippodrome in Birmingham, on where the future is for arts going forward. We've talked to people in hospitality and said, well, those particularly who rely on a big hippodrome, but therefore, how are you coping? We're talking about mental health, how leaders cope with this. We've got a piece from a vice chancellor of a huge university. How did he manage the entire stakeholder base? You got overseas students, UK students, you got lecturers, part-time lecturers, you got the local councils, you got the Department of Education, you got government. How does he cope with all of those? And then, of course, to go from a physical teaching environment to blended, how do you get all the resource together? How does technology work? We got a piece from the chair of WM5G talking about technology and 5G, how that's going to impact. We've got leadership. How do you lead an entire region? So Andy Street's doing a piece on how you run an entire region. Post-COVID, post-Brexit, we've got written pieces from journalists around India and why India potentially is one of the places to go to. We've also got biographies on people who've flourished through COVID. One particular instance is from Leicester. The guy is always been on products around bacteria. You can imagine everybody wants these products. We've done a couple of insights into 2 lockdown regions, what it meant for them, Leicester and Manchester. So what's the insight? What do people feel there? So as you can see, it's more sort of top end, sort of strategic, global picture. Because I'm of the belief, the more knowledge you have, the better leader you will be, the better entrepreneur you will be, and the better your ability to predict, stress test, and be a step ahead. And I think if you get all that stuff together, you actually, within your own sector, could actually become an influencer.
Yeah.
And if you're an influencer, the likelihood is your business will do well.
And that's what I was going to ask you. Is you saying what do you think the advantage? You've got the business. What do you think the advantage are as a business influencer? We were talking about this just before we come and recorded the session, and how some people have a profile and how some people don't.
Well, look. Well, what was interesting when I started to research the area, I found those who ran tech companies tended to have a profile.
Mm.
Those who ran large industrial conglomerates were invisible. That almost told you about the culture of the two sort of sectors. So tech companies tend to be open and tend to be younger. And remember, most tech companies are probably only 10 years old.
Yeah.
So by their nature, they've adopted and adapted social media. They tend to be a lot more open. The older, more traditional industries tend to be a lot more enclosed, different culture. I think influencers come in many guises for business. So they tend to be entrepreneurs. So Bill Gates, I'm just going to read some numbers off you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bill Gates has got 52 million followers on Twitter. He's got 6 million on Instagram, and he's the most high profile on LinkedIn, 29 million. And people tend to forget about LinkedIn. So they could be entrepreneurs. You won't be surprised. Elon Musk is a big influencer, and he's got almost 40 million Twitter followers. But there's a caveat here. We haven't checked all their followers, so we don't have their face. Yeah. We also think, from a business influencer perspective, policymakers, people who create business policy, they influence what you and I do. And you can imagine top of the pile is Mr. Trump.
Yeah.
With 86 million. He's doing okay. We've got probably Ninder Modi, Prime Minister of India. He has 62 million. So he's not far behind, largest democracy. Interestingly, probably the most powerful woman in the world, who's known to be, what do they say, very robust, very traditional in her thinking, but is very powerful, is Chancellor Merkel.
Yeah, no, that surprised me.
But she's only got 66,000 followers. And I think she probably thinks my actions speak probably greater than words. So, probably one of the biggest entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, Oprah Winfrey, 44 million. So entrepreneurs have a huge following, policymakers have a huge following, thought leaders, people who can add value through their thoughts. Robin Sharma, the guy, he's got 1.1 million. Tony Robbins, 3.1 million. So there's thought leaders, policymakers. Then there's CEOs. So these are people employed by a business. You won't be surprised that two of the highest numbers are people who run high-tech companies.
Yeah.
Tim Cook, 12 million, Apple. Remember, he didn't start Apple.
No, he didn't. No.
12 million. Sundar Pichai, which is, I think, looks after Google, 3.1 million. So CEOs, and I suppose probably lower down in terms of lobbying government on behalf of business, then you probably got the CBI and the Chambers of Commerce.
Yeah.
But they're the kind of influencers. And I suppose people do say to me, but should you be open? Should you be transparent? And I think if you're on a platform where your consumers can feel they can drop you a tweet and actually talk to you, I think the chances are that because you're seen to be more open and transparent, you're probably going to increase brand loyalty. I think equally for a leader, it's good to be close to the coalface and to see what people are saying and doing. You can react quickly. If you can react, then I think the consumers will see you in a favorable light. People tend to follow people rather than institutions, if that makes sense. So one of the most powerful leaders we have in this country is actually invisible on social media. And that's because he's the governor of the Bank of England. And every word of his is controlled by the Bank of England. And you can see why. Because if he says the wrong word, you can shift markets around the world. So there's a logic to that. But I think the perception is if you're on social media, the perception is you're approachable. And I think in today's consumerism market, driven market, where people are conscious of health, environment, then if you're seen to be out there and approachable, then I think your branding, I think, probably have a better sort of cogency in the marketplace. And I suppose if your competitors are doing it, I suppose you could ask yourself, why aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And if your competitors aren't, maybe this gives you a competitive advantage of being there. So, and I think also, I think if you're not there, then you could be perceived as being a bit dinosaur, a bit prehistoric, a bit behind the times, perception-wise. And I think you have to embrace a changing world, and more people spend time on social media. And I think it's an error. I think it's an error, unless you're an Angela Merkel. Yeah. And if you take Mr. Trump, I mean, he uses Twitter to talk to his audience, and he knows he doesn't have to go through newspapers and TV channels to get his view across, even though Twitter then do say afterwards, this could be fake news. But he's democratized the whole medium. He does not have to rely on traditional media to communicate with the marketplace. And I think the days of having to rely on third parties to communicate for you have gone. Every individual, Adam, you and I, are media machines. Yep. We have our own media company. Just for the mere fact we're on social media, we are all journalists. We can all tell a story.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, absolutely. I totally agree. Now, I'm going to move on to some just random questions. Actually, I'm interested. How does Ninder Johal keep up with his own personal development?
That's a very good question. I think, and I won't take you into the next room, but there's a whole shelf of about 90 books I haven't read yet, which I'm planning to do. But I've started to read them. So reading, I've picked up a lot recently, which I haven't done for a while. Secondly, I do read a lot of the press to stay on top of things. So I think one is current affairs, which is fine, but I think the other thing is thought leadership. I think thirdly, I speak to people deliberately outside my sector, because you learn from people who are different to you.
Yeah.
The fourth way I've learned probably tremendously is I've sat on a number of diverse boards, and people said to me, "You're crazy. Why do you sit on so many boards? What a waste of time." Well, actually, no, because one, you tend to hear and learn from a mix of people that are different to you on different subjects. But I've also learned from sitting with people who are much better than me. And what they do is they drag you up with them.
Yeah.
They drag you up with them because they're so brilliant. And you learn from listening to them and watching their body language and watch the way they communicate their argument. And that's how you learn.
Yeah.
So I use a range of learning tools. So I joined, and I think finally, I think my father, I remember when I was about 10, he was working in the factories in the Black Country, and he got injured, he lost his eyesight. And I remember at the age of between 10 and 12, or maybe 8, he was in and out of hospital. I think he had about 15 operations. And I knew then we were indebted to the NHS. I always said that when you feel you've got a skill set that can aid your community, then you should use it. So I sit on a number of, so the Black Country LEP, I don't get paid for it. I sit on the West Midlands Combine, I don't get paid for it. I sit on the WM5G, I don't get paid for it. But if I can help, and a couple of charities I sit on, but if I can assist with my experience to make the place that I live in a better place, then I think it's all incumbent on us to do that. And it's my way of paying the debt back when I saw my father going in and out of hospital. And of course, I'm a beneficiary of the education system here. So and so to me, it's you've got to do your bit, and if you do your bit, you'll be amazed what you can learn from doing your bit, from sitting around with people. So that's really where I do my learning. Lots of different ways.
Lots of different ways. Yeah. Is there any one particular book that you've read throughout, going right up to now, that is sort of like said, yeah, that's the one that sort of like really changed me?
Yeah, it didn't change me, but it gave me an outlook. And it's a book called The Maverick by Ricardo Sembler. And the views in there were just so radical and so creative. So creative. I went, this is just amazing. So I'm not going to give the story about telling you, but Ricardo Sembler, he was a musician, by the way, so I shouldn't be surprised. I shouldn't. But the way he approached business was just incredible. It's just incredible. And so that was a brilliant book. Interesting. Recently, I just read the story by Phil Knight around Nike.
Now, somebody's recommended that one to me, and I run a book club, and I've posed it last night as to whether we should read that one.
Yeah, that's a very good one. I've dipped into, I haven't quite finished yet, a bit of the Branson story, although he's in a bit of trouble with his Virgin and landing. But there's a few other books, and I'm more than happy to share a list and make a share. But there's a number of books I haven't quite read yet. But there's something called Street. I can't remember. It's an American book. Brilliant for anybody who wants to be an entrepreneur. Really full of some fantastic stuff. And the other thing, remember I talked about a dysfunctional education system, I personally believe. And the guy, is it Mark McCormick, wrote a book, Things They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School. And that's quite good. That's quite good. And he picks up on all the soft skills and all the things that you and I just spoke about earlier. They don't teach in education. The things that make us human beings, basically. But yeah, there's quite a lot of a list of really pretty good books. For a friend of mine, local guy, Paul Bassi, he wrote a book called Brick by Brick in the property game, and that was very well written as well. I know him particularly well, and that was good. But there are lots of very good books. Very good books. I think if you're into innovation, then there's a lot of chap called Matthew, what his surname, it runs for the Times. It's about creative thinking and black box thinking. But yeah, so I think sit around with really good people. You'll learn a lot from them.
It's that inner circle, isn't it? I think somebody always said to me that you're the sum of the 5 people you hang around with. So make sure the 5 people you hang around with are the ones that you want to learn from, and the inner circle side. I suppose that's where the mastermind and the inner circle side comes from. You know, from that side.
And I get so much, and I've been fortunate because we do big events for entrepreneurs. I have the good fortune to spend a lot of time with some very successful entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And I think you don't realize, but it rubs off on you.
Yeah.
Their relentless, their relentless ambition, their drive, their quick thinking, they're thinking all the time, the innovation, and it rubs off on you. It really does rub off on you. And I would just say, surround yourself with people with positivity. Don't go with negative people. Stick with positivity. Make sure they're better than you. If you're going to become a better tennis player, play somebody who's better than you.
Yeah.
And just mix with those kind of people. And if someone's very negative, either shun away from them or say, listen, I think you need to go and sort yourself out because, you know, this isn't good for you. And you know, we all are in dark places. I've been there a few times, but resilience is key, and a support structure is very key.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, because we're discussing that, I'm looking up in my notes. There's one that's just stuck out to me. What makes you feel inspired or like your best self?
Sorry, so repeat that question again. Then what?
What makes you feel inspired or like your best self?
Okay, so I suppose I regard myself as pretty relentless. You know, when I'm onto something, I just go for it. My wife, on the other hand, is very reflective. I tend to forget the bad decision I made 3 seconds ago. I tend to move on very, very quick. My wife is the opposite and says you need to reflect, think about things, and why did that go wrong? I tend to be the opposite. So I think my wife backs me up quite nicely. So she makes me sort of slow down a bit. And I think relentlessness is probably, somebody called it resourcefulness. I think all entrepreneurs are resourceful. I think entrepreneurs, you know, when there's a problem, they find a route around it. And I think probably I treat people, I think the way I want to be treated myself. And I think if someone drops you an email, respond. Even if you're late, respond. If somebody calls you, respond. Because you would like it. I mean, the worst thing I think we all have is we call someone or email and they just ignore us.
Yeah.
You know, even if it's not right for you, just say thanks, but sorry.
Yeah.
They'll remember you saying thanks and sorry, and tomorrow they could be your biggest client.
Yeah. It doesn't cost anything. Politeness and that, it doesn't cost a thing, not at all. So I'm conscious of time and things like that because of your time and being busy. So there is one that I wanted to ask you, and I did wonder whether I was going to ask you a question that's in this, but if in 150 years science fails to save us and all that is left is a book about your life, what would the title be and what would the blurb tell us about Ninder Johal?
I suppose it'd be something like From Bangor to the Boardroom, probably. Because it started
That's a good title, actually.
Yeah, Bangor to the Boardroom. Started with Bangor music and ended up in the boardroom. And I think I would say as a strapline, every individual has the ability and hopefully the opportunity to influence others.
Excellent. Superb.
I think something like that.
Superb. I'm going to end on that. What I'm going to say is I will put all the links to all your stuff in the description to this podcast. So if you've got a bio and your links and everything like that, I'll put that in. So it's all there. Just to say thank you very much for your time, Ninder. It's been brilliant. And
if anybody wants to subscribe, digital copy is free. Just DM me either through Adam or me or.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I will. Is there a link to anything? Have you got the website and everything up for the business influencer on that side?
That will be up on Monday. But if you DM your direct mail, you or me, with the email address, we'll send it to the office, and the office will put you in the database, and bang, you'll get it into your inbox.
Well, this will probably go out not Monday, a week on Monday. So if you want
it'll have
we
already
can put
been
it
out.
in. Yeah,
it'll have already been out.
So yeah, no.
Yeah.
But thank you very much. It's been absolute pleasure.
Thank you.